Did NBC News leak the Access Hollywood tape to the Washington Post specifically in order to damage Donald Trump? Billy Bush certainly thinks so. The former host of Access Hollywood recently sat down with Tucker Carlson to relate the incident from his perspective. Bush says it was clearly a violation of journalistic standards to publish the tape in which Donald Trump infamously made his disgusting grab them by the etc. remark. He also surmises that NBC was out to get Trump and was looking for anything damaging it might have, but because publishing the tape themselves could have invited legal repercussions because they taped Trump without his knowledge, they passed it along to the Post. Here's Bush telling Tucker about NBC's decision to turn on Trump, who he had previously been the network's biggest star when he hosted The Apprentice.
Jeff Zucker, who I like, was running the show at NBC Entertainment. He's the one who he built this. If Trump is Frankenstein, he built him in the laboratory. And they built this apprentice, and they made him the wheeling and dealing machine on his helicopter, this incredible image. Can you imagine a better image on network television crafted for you than that one? And Zucker then became, years later, the head of the resistance. The guy that built him then became the head of the resistance at CNN.
It's amazing.
It's amazing in a matter of 10 years. Like this recording of this bus tape that was I would have been fired. It had leaked out then for hurting the star. 11 years later, and a lawsuit over Miss Universe and whatever else, NBC feels completely differently about Donald Trump, and now it's get him at all costs.
So this interview got posted yesterday, and I actually, rare for me, I usually just watch clips of relevant interviews. I watched the whole thing. It was a very good interview. I know you're no fan of Tucker Carlson. I think you would have actually enjoyed the interview. It was very interesting, very informative from Billy Bush's perspective on the whole incident, which we have not heard very much. I mean, he went silent for years and years and years. He was extremely negatively affected by what happened. He didn't work for years. He talks a lot about that, and I think he comes across as a somewhat sympathetic figure. He says when it happened, when Trump made that remark, he was not paying attention and had no idea it was said, and the first time he had no recollection of it. He recalled other parts of that conversation, and he had flagged that recording for his bosses there because of something Trump had said about a coworker of his. But he had no recollection of that part of it until the tape was played for him years later. But what he said is that, so that was recorded during a period where Trump didn't know they were rolling, and so they couldn't have just released it because he could have sued. It was in California, which is, you have to, both people know you're recording, and they wouldn't have wanted to release it at that time because he was their biggest star, and they wanted to protect him. And so Billy Bush describes the weird position he was put in that he was expected to spend all his time with Trump, interviewing Trump, glorifying Trump for years because Trump was the star of the network. And then when they changed into destroy Trump mode, and they gave that to the Washington Post and destroyed Billy Bush's career, it was very interesting.
So I am, as you might expect, not very sympathetic to the idea, which I'm assuming comes from Tucker, because indeed I have not watched that. It's a rather long interview, I think. But the idea that, oh, this is terrible because NBC colluded with the Washington Post to damage Donald Trump. The contents of that tape are plainly in the public interest. Now, let's, for a moment, indulge me with a counterfactual here, where Barack Obama, before being elected president, makes those remarks in the same circumstance. And NBC or whomever does not give them up, keeps them private, keeps them secret, and at some later point it's discovered that Obama said that. Does anyone seriously think for a second that Tucker Carlson would come out and say, well, that was very impressive of NBC to protect Obama's privacy? Of course he wouldn't say that. He would say, oh, this is a cover-up, it's terrible, typical liberal media. It's either right or it's wrong to introduce things that are recorded in that sort of circumstance, but are of public interest into the public domain. And I would argue it's completely justified to put that into the public domain.
It is certainly in the public interest to hear the presidential candidate, who then became president, saying these remarks. I agree with that. I think it was, the Washington Post, having obtained it, certainly should have run with the story. Now, the Washington Post reporter who did obtain it, David Fahrenthold, is, Billy Bush said in that interview, was a close college friend of the person at NBC who had the tape, and that they were groomsmen in Chelsea Clinton's wedding. So there's a little bit of an
That's just journalistic good luck, though, that you have to know the source.
Yeah, I mean, this is, the major media corporation leaks private conversation to best friend of the guy who recorded it to damage their former star who's now a political candidate. There's something sleazy about it to me, even if the end product is perfectly journalistically defensible.
But if we get into the situation of defending, because you're normally an advocate for the freedom of information and freedom of speech.
Well, I'm not saying it should be suppressed. I'm just talking about.
But if we get into the suggestion that news organizations somehow shouldn't publish things if it has been leaked with ulterior motives or with quote-unquote sleazy motives, that seems to lead into a whole other realm of nonsense.
Journalistically, you should not record people without their permission, except in rare circumstances.
Right. No, I mean, that's a fair...
I would never record someone without their permission, unless it was a sensitive national security matter so overwhelmingly in the public interest that I would...
but the point is here that the material, as I think, to be fair, you do acknowledge, was in the public interest because of the insights that it gave into the character or attitudes of Donald Trump, who was then, the first time around, seeking to become President of the United States. There is obviously a public interest in doing that. Now, who Fahrenholt got the leak from, I don't know. I take Billy Bush at his word if he says it came from whomever. But, of course, people who want to get information to the public are going to go to reporters who they either know or trust or whose work they respect. There's always going to be some... you're going to decide who to give it to.
I know, but it's a little odd, but they are a media company, and they can't use it because they recorded it without his knowledge, which is not something you can do journalistically, ethically, and might have actually been illegal. So they gave it to something he could sue over because it's California at the time was a two-party state to recordings. I mean, that law might have gotten struck down if it was an important enough case and went before the Supreme Court. Who knows? But then they give it to a friendly media person in another place. I mean, I'll just say it again. It seems sleazy to me.
I don't really understand the outrage about it. I mean,
I hope your off-camera moments are not being, collected here to damage you. If you go to some rival YouTube show, you go join Breaking Points. Yeah. We're really out to get you, Niall. And we're like, oh, you wouldn't believe these shit he says when the cameras aren't rolling. Just kidding. He's a perfect gentleman at all times.
No,
do you know what I'm saying?
No, I understand that point. I understand the point that it is embarrassing, would be embarrassing for almost anybody to have every private utterance publicized. Someone years ago said that Google could break up almost every marriage in the country if it wished to do so because of various things. But the point is, Donald Trump was a candidate for the presidency. Yeah. There was this recording of him saying extremely distasteful things about women. It was completely legitimate to publicize that, in my opinion.
Good discussion. Let us know what you think, and we'll be back with more Rising right after this.